Hi, this is Roslyn Snyder from Wisdom in Your Life. I'm here on the banks of the Swan River in Perth, Western Australia, and we're going to share a case study on the applications of realm theory. Now, realm theory is a pattern of life, and this pattern shows how everything in the universe is connected, and it's one single pattern. Now, all my life I've seen this pattern, and growing up I just assumed everyone else could see it. But as I got older, I realised that not everyone could see it, and some people can see parts of it, some people cannot see it at all. And so today I'm going to just talk a little bit about it in terms of how we used it to develop a cultural growth strategy for the city of Melville here in Western Australia. And so with realm theory, every entity, and an entity is you or me, it's the trees, it's the river, it's the whole country. So Australia is an entity, Perth is an entity, wherever you are in the world is an entity. It's any living thing that can be identified. Now, every single entity will have a nature, which is its unique energy pattern. It will have a place, and different entities will have different places. For humans, our place is at the centre of our life, and it will also have a purpose. So a river has a purpose, us as humans have a purpose. And when we live according to all our nature, place and purpose, we actually live in harmony, right? However, most of what we're doing today in modern society, we're not in harmony. We feel isolated, fragmented, and some of us are actually disintegrating. Sorry about that. So one of the things we do is our natural way of being is a collective circular collaboration. And I've got these two images behind me, and the first one I'm going to talk about is this collective circular collaboration. And we'll see in the background there's this pattern, and that is the pattern of the land where you live, right? Here, this is the pattern of Western Australia or Perth. In other parts of the world, if you're in the Netherlands, you will have a different pattern. If you're in England, you'll have a different pattern. In the United States, there'll be a different pattern of the land. So, if you go into the snow, you need to know how to survive there. Whereas here in Australia, in Western Australia, we rarely get snow, but we've got deserts and heat up until 46 degrees. So we need to know how to live here, right? Now, this pattern is our culture. It's in the background of everything. Now, you'll notice in here, there's all these people. Each person is a representation of a part of that pattern. So you'll notice that by the colours. In this particular one, you will notice that everyone is connected. Everyone is touching one another. That's our connection. You'll also notice that there's 3 larger people. That represents that there are, in any group thing, there will be 3 that have the most influence, and that's known as the power of 3, which I'm not going to get into today. But in this case, these 2 here represent the vision, and this person here nurtures the young people coming through, right? Now, each of these could represent in a company, it could be like the marketing arm, it could represent the core business in the middle, it could be research and development, gives the organisation legs. It can be whatever you want it to be. Now, the other interesting thing is each person can grow to their full potential. And each person is free to go and come back into this organisation, and we can always squeeze another person in. And this is a natural collective circular collaboration. Everything happens as one because collectively we form one more entity, right? And that's our natural way of being for human beings. However, our communities and societal structures tend to do this. And this is an individual competitive hierarchy. Once again, we have the culture in the background. And I don't know whether you can see this clearly, but in the background are little tiny squares, which represents our scientific unconscious bias, I suppose. It's how we organise everything. We define everything, and we define everything and put it into a box, right? Now, that culture that's in the background is represented in our cultural structure. And this could be a workplace, it could be a community, it could be even in a family. Now, you'll notice that there's a couple of boxes out here. That represents the people that don't even fit into our hierarchy. And at different times throughout society and time, it's different. But this could be refugees, it could be homeless people, it could be drug addicts, it could be single mums, it could be a particular religious group is on the outer and they don't even fit into the hierarchy. You'll also notice that within each of the boxes, to fit in, you actually have to shrink yourself down to fit in or leave a large part of yourself out. And this is what happens in our workplaces, in our families. We're living less than our true nature, place and purpose. Other people are putting us in a place. Now, the other thing to notice is that to get ahead, you actually have to stand on other people, which is not actually part of our human nature. And so this is actually fragmenting and isolating individuals, families, communities and workplaces. And over the last probably 100 years, we have seen this break down further and further. Now, I set up Wisdom in Your Life to actually change this. And one of the ways we've been doing that is actually trying to find a way to bring these, I suppose, a bit closer together. We have actually developed a cultural integrity audit, which actually measures whether your organisation is here or here, identifies what needs to happen to change that. And that's been used in organisations to measure what is actually going on. But today we're going to talk about, and one of my colleagues is going to talk about, how we use this in the city of Melville. And this was a process where, based on the laws of the land, we developed our nature, place and purpose internally, and then took it externally and developed a strategy that emerged from that collective. Now, this is, we believe, the first time this has ever been done anywhere in Australia within a city council. And so now I'm going to hand over to Storm, who will take you through the 3 stages that we went through and then share with you the cultural strategy that we developed. So enjoy.
Thank you, Ros. So now I'm going to talk about the process and what I actually did with the city of Melville. And the project itself, we set out in 3 stages. And the first stage was the law of the land. And the purpose of the law of the land was really to anchor the participants to those natural laws and the natural flow and happenings that Ros also mentioned about earlier. Because often in our world today, in the hierarchy structure, we get so caught up on doing, thinking, and we don't give ourselves time to sink into those natural flows. And the way that we did this project was quite different. I wanted to take the participants through the process where we honoured that natural flow. Now that exists out there, but it also exists within ourselves, right? To get there, I'm going to show you a diagram in a minute, and I'm hoping that this will make a whole lot more sense for you. But the natural laws of the universe and the laws of the land, we have to go through somewhat of a process to get there. And this was stage 1. I ran 10 workshops with the City of Melville, and I think we had about 15 participants come through each of them. I'm just going to show you. Right, so here we have what looks like another hierarchy. Right, but it's a triangle diagram. At the top we have actions. And our actions is actually kind of broken in. There's 2 parts to our actions. One is what we say and one is what we do, right? Because we all know people who might say what they're going to do but they don't do it, okay? And our actions is mostly what other people see of us and what we only ever see of other people, yeah? So it's very behaviour heavy up here. Underneath we have our thinking. This framework or diagram is also, I guess for me, I see it as another human process or a human way, and it really helps me to analyse myself and to analyse dynamics that are happening around me. And I'm saying this because I'm going to try and weave this all into where it fits a bit later on, and how that gave more essence into this process of circular collaboration, right? So we have our actions at the top, and as you can see underneath, we've got our thinking. So we think more than we do. But most of our thinking, really, under here, is unconscious. And a small part of it is conscious, or that we're aware of, right? Okay. So we have our actions and our thinking. In our thinking space, a few things can happen. One is that we get thinking spirals, and this may be where you just overthink, or you have a thought and you can't get out of that spiral, right? And it's just kind of doing your head in. And I'm sure most of us can relate to a time where that has happened to us. And I put the thinking spiral in the conscious space because we're very aware of it, yeah? And it consumes a lot of our energy. Something else that happens in the thinking area is that we get blind spots. Now, our blind spots are what we don't know, therefore they're in our unconscious psyche, yeah? And we all have them. Now, this is quite important because this often is where our unconscious bias comes into play when we're interacting with other people. Now, if we're in leadership roles or executive roles and we're working on strategy at this level, we need to be aware of our blind spots as well, rather than what we just know in our conscious space, if that makes sense. Under our thinking, we have our feelings. Now, we feel more than we think, and we think more than we do, whether we realise it or not. Again, in our feeling space, we have a couple of things happen. One, we can get emotional blocks. And I used to always refer to this as the lump in my throat, which stops any emotions bubbling up and coming out. So I physically block my emotions from flowing through me, right? Again, almost everyone I speak to knows what this feels like. We also have emotional black holes. Now, if we think about what do black holes do in space, they simply consume everything around it, right? And what this might feel like in someone is, if you've been, again, I will say we all know someone who, when we've been around them, they kind of drain our energy, yeah? And sometimes we don't really know why. This could be an emotional black hole, yeah? And emotional black holes are formed in childhood due to unmet emotional needs, right? And what these do is suck everything in it, consumes what we say, what we do, our thinking gets consumed into our black holes. Whereas the emotional blocks, and I'll get to what's under here in a bit, stops anything coming up from down here and connecting with the top part of us, which is why it's that kind of stopping anything bubbling up. Right. As children, and I just want to mention, children naturally know how to have their emotions flow through their body. You know when they're happy, you feel a child is happy, you see them, they're laughing, it's all over their body. Likewise, when they're sad, they know what they mean, they often go for cuddles. Likewise, when they're angry, they're throwing a tantrum. Very straightforward. But children feel their emotions all over their body, and then they let it go, right? As adults, we've been taught not to process all of our emotion, or only process the good emotion and not the bad emotion. And so we've been taught by the society that we live in to not fully express ourselves, right? And that's where a lot of these can come in. So, yep, I'll get back to that in a bit. Then we have our beliefs. So our beliefs inform our feelings, inform our thinking, inform our actions. Where do we get our beliefs from? Often we get them from the moment we're born, right? We're born into a belief system, whether it's atheist, whether it's a religious one, whether it's democratic, whatever it might be. But we get them from birth, right? We also get them from our perception of the world through our experience over time, growing up. So we have all of these external factors that inform our beliefs. Now, our beliefs are very deep within us, as we know. We often hold our core values here, principles and things like that, which inform how we show up, how we view and how we operate in the world. Now, as we know, as human beings, people have different beliefs, people have different views, and so we need to consider that when we come together for a collaborative approach, regardless of what the outcome is, yeah? So it's very important to be aware of all of this. Under our beliefs, however, we have, I'm going to say laws of the universe. This is the natural law of the land, yeah? And we also have our core being. Everyone has a core being that sits at this level. Now, I often describe my core as my hum, that used to hum a certain way if I knew something was right for me or if I knew it wasn't so right for me. Other people may have words for it, such as intuition, vision, that kind of inner calling. Whatever it is for you, most people can identify that at some point in their life, they just knew it was right and they couldn't explain it. And it's that kind of pull that I'm going to be referring to as your core, right? It's your core nature, and that will come into play a bit later on. So, the Law of the Land workshop, stage 1, was to delve into this, into the many layers. I am presenting it to you today as a very topical description, right? We have 4 hours on this that I do in the Law of the Land. But the purpose is to invite people that are in the room to have a look about, to explore within themselves, what are their thinking spirals, what are their blind spots, do they have any emotional blocks or black holes, how do our beliefs inform any of these, and what is the truth of it? Because, and I will keep referring back to today's society, when we operate in the workplace, and I'm going to speak from a strategy point of view, when we're creating strategy, often we will measure, talk about the vision, right? Of something, of a direction, whatever we want to do, make the world a better place, blah, blah, blah. How are we going to do that, right? And then we measure that. And mostly it focuses only on the 10%, right? So we reinforce the do, the think, and the busyness. Very rarely in corporate world and structures, we see a deeper integration of the whole self and or the whole system that exists to inform strategy, policies, whatever this 10% might be later on down the track, right? And so participants in the Law of the Land, one, to be aware that this exists, one, to be aware that it exists within ourselves and what are the blocks, what are the blind spots that are the barriers to connecting to that, and then to communicate from down here. So Ros also mentioned that there are different patterns of the land depending on where you are in the world. And that is quite important depending on where you're working from, where you're living from, and where you're collaborating on as well. In the City of Melville project, we're on Noongar Budja, Noongar country here in WA, Perth. So it's very important to tune in to the nuances of Aboriginal culture that interprets the natural laws of the land here, and to embed that in. And so we're all connected at this level, at a universal truths level. The best way to do that is to explore ourselves, as I've said before, and I think multiple times already, is to explore our hum, explore our core nature, and tune into that. Because when we connect down here, and especially with other people, we can not necessarily bypass, that's not the right word. We can have different beliefs, right? And we can slowly chip away at these things that hold us back to really communicating with each other and also with ourselves, yeah? So the law of the land, the stage 1 process, was really about looking at our own unconscious biases, our own history, the history of the people that we're working with, and embedding it within the laws and the local laws of where we live and work today. So this was really the foundation, moving forward into nature, place and purpose. So from the law of the land, we had 13 participants self-select to do a deeper dive into stage 2. Now stage 2 was nature, place and purpose. And the purpose of stage 2 was really to have participants integrate their newfound knowledge, but also explore a little bit more about their natural core energy pattern, how that interacts with other cores in the group, and also being aware of certain triggers or blocks that kind of came into interaction when we were working with each other. So this was over 3 days, but I held the workshops, I think, every 2 weeks. And that's quite important as well. The purpose that we didn't have them in continuous days was so that participants, when we're learning and deeper diving within these workshops, they have the time in between to sit with it and to integrate the new information, and also to practice, and then to observe how they respond back in the normal routines of life. So we started with place being the first workshop, the first day. Now, as we'd mentioned earlier, the place is simply at the center of your life, right? So with the diagram that I'd shown before, place is operating from your core, embedded at the universal level, down there, yeah? But also being aware of all of the things up the top, so the blocks and the blind spots and the assumptions, all of those things. So I had to have participants at the center of their life, right? This is the whole purpose. And I feel like, which is quite important to maintain the essence of this process as well. So that's place. Then we had our second workshop 2 weeks later, which is nature. So I mentioned that as my hum. And we did a few different activities, lots of painting, some drawing and some guided activities to explore when our hum speaks to us, when our knowing kind of jumps out. Often we have to revisit things that we did in childhood. So as a group, and shall I say, as a facilitator, I had to take the group on a journey back in time as well, in a safe space, and also bring that to the here and now, because the here and now is also a place, yeah? And integrating these two. So once we know and are connected to our nature, and we're living from the center of our life. We have our nature and our place integrated. It's only when we live and work and we be from that place, integrated with our nature, our natural state of being, is when our purpose unfolds. Now we have, I think, 3 purposes, but today I'm just going to mention our life purpose, which is to grow. And for the purpose of this program or this strategy project was to have the participants operating from their core and practice their, practice their purpose, right? Which will come into growth, which leads into stage 3, which was the growth strategy or the cultural strategy. Now, the reason this is so important to take participants on a journey and to really anchor them down within themselves, but also within their external world, and anchoring it into nature, is so that we can, from the core level down here, feed that up over time, and this will happen, happened in stage 3, feed that up through ourselves, interpreted through ourselves, being aware of what blocks we had, what our blind spots were, what we thought we knew, because we can go to uni and we can know lots of things. But if it's not integrated into our relationships, into other people's purposes or the visions or whatever brings meaning to our lives and those spaces in between, then is it really integrated? It's just information, right? It's not necessarily wisdom. And so the process was to really integrate the newfound knowledge and experience, but also bring in what you know. So we had to hold off a bit of, well, I know this and I'm an expert in this area and I've got background in this area, until we cultivated our sense of being as individuals, to come together as a group. So at the beginning, we had individual entities, and this group itself in stage 2 became an entity. And what came out of this process was the entity itself had a place in the city of Melville and also in the hearts of the people. So that was the place in the hearts of the people. The nature it was a growth strategy and a cultural strategy, and one that focuses on the being and the process, not necessarily the doing. So I think it's safe to say that most of you will know that plans and strategies and all these projects that focus on the top part of the pyramid that I mentioned earlier around behaviour and actions and doing, often some of them are successful, but often they don't make meaningful change and they're not very successful. And that's the difference between this process. We wanted to cultivate it from a collective down here, filter it up through the knowledge, and the knowledge only comes later, right? We didn't start with that. So that was nature, place, and then purpose. In terms of the purpose of the newfound entity, the new group, I did a little activity, and it's a poetry, creative writing activity where I took the participants outside on the lawn, and we all wrote a line each. And as we stood in a circle, I got the participants to read their poem and then to choose just one line out of each poem. And we observed where people would perhaps change in the circles so that what was being read kind of had a flow. And the purpose of that creative writing activity was to find the rhythm within the group, but also to practice the natural flow of the newfound entity. And again, something like that, turning to the creative activities, really digs into our unconscious psyche as well, to channel the information that's coming from the land up into our place, which is Noongar Boodja, where we actually did that activity here on this country, just a couple of meters over there. So for me, that process is quite an integral one. It's got meaning, it's got essence, and I hear some of the workers and communities even come back to me now, talk about when people ask me, what did you do, or how was the process with the, with Wisdom in Your Life and this growth strategy, rather than just talking about the strategy itself and what the directions are and what the actions are, the participants end up talking about their journey, end up talking about their experience, and what that does is invite the people who are asking the questions in. And that is where the body of work is, within the hearts of the people, sharing the story, sharing the process, and sharing the newfound knowledge. And that invites people in, rather than if someone's saying, what is the strategy of this organisation, or why are we doing this for this department, handing them a piece of paper or a document and saying, read this, right? The purpose of this is to enrich those relationships and the interactions around the strategy, but it also informs us on how to do the strategy later. And so that really is the purpose of the Nature, Place and Purpose. Once we had the group, I don't like saying the entity, but we created an entity. From stage 2, Nature, Place and Purpose, we were able to then go into the CCC collaboration, which the strategy emerged from there. But we had to get the environment right, the people right, the hearts right. We had to open that space within ourselves, and then also to create the space to create this strategy. So the CCC process, the collective circular collaboration, was 2 days. And out of that, there was a bit back and forth. And I do want to make mention, because I think it's important, that during the 2 days, it was very interesting. We all in the room felt the energy shift a little bit, because when it came time to create this document and to put the words on the paper and the vision and all of that, we noticed, and I very much noticed, that the energy of the system that existed, being the competitive hierarchy, was finding its way back in, and we wanted to go into a headspace and go, well, we need this, and we need this, and we need this, right? And that went on a little bit for about half the day. And it was a very interesting process, but we all came out of it recognizing that that had happened, and that what we need to do is just reconnect back into ourselves, take the time to let that kind of settle, and then to lean in with more open heart. And to have those difficult conversations as well. So the process itself was such a learning opportunity for all of us to integrate new information, integrate new knowledge, but also to be able to create something that was quite different for the first time as well, and to trust in the process. There were times throughout the entire project where we would be, as a group, we would be doing activities and a block would come up for someone. And so as a facilitator, it was quite important for me to recognize that. And often it would be, okay, let's paint through some guided painting or whatever it might be to flush through those blocks, and then we come back. Sometimes we just had to put the workshops on hold, and that was okay as well. And I say okay because, again, it's really tied into the natural flow and the natural rhythm of the land that we're on. The seasons change when the seasons change. They change when they're ready, not when we say it's ready, right? Often we might hear people say, oh, summer's coming late. Well, actually, no, summer's coming right on time. We just put these defines on it. So from the very beginning and throughout the entire process, the way that the timeline and the way that we carried out this project was really quite flexible. And, that can be challenging for some of us to feel like we're not hitting deadlines. And we had to manage those expectations as we went along, as the entity evolved, and also as the project and the cultural vision evolved as well. Often we don't hear that in standard corporate world, but the growth that the participants have communicated back to me and continue to talk about is so much more, because we created that safe space to come in to organically collaborate from a sense of awareness of ourselves, to practice being open and practicing our responses to difficult situations and not getting in a headspace all the time. And then come in at the back end with stage 3 to integrate all of those new experiences with what we actually know and what we've learned and what we're, expertise in as well. So in essence, that I say a lot of the process was quite different, but that's where all the work happens. And if we put too many time restraints on things to grow, on a project to grow, on ourselves to evolve with the project, we really cut off that opportunity to have a authentic, collective, circular collaboration, and for something beautiful to be formed out of that as well. When we rush things, it ends up being just something that we put on the shelves or something else that ticks a box, rather than honouring the process that it needs to take, and also allowing everyone who's involved to evolve with that and to grow with that as well. And so at the end of it, we ended up with a cultural growth strategy that sits within the heart of the people. And so, that's the end product, having something on paper, but it lives more so within the participants within the City of Melville. And that was the main purpose of, Wisdom in Your Life in the City of Melville. And that's what we aim to carry forward in all of our work, is that deeper change and a way of doing things differently. So here we have the cultural growth strategy, where you can see we've got the nature, place and the purpose of the strategy. And we also have the vision statement, and this was the vision statement that came out of the poetry activity that I did with the participants. And the vision statement that came out of that really informed the vision of where we wanted to take and to grow this strategy. Here we have the artwork, which is a beautiful representation of the strategy itself. We had a young Aboriginal girl sit in with the process while she was taking in all of the information, and she actually did this artwork. And what it shows is the energy pattern and the culture in the land that has come up through the process. So this is quite special and quite beautiful, and I think it just embeds and it really informs the essence of this strategy. And now we have the strategy itself. As you can see, we've got the physical, spiritual, surroundings, emotional, thinking, and other people. These are all aspects of our lives, and one of the processes that came to light was there is a natural energy pattern under this, and we were able to recognise that it already existed within the City of Melville. So what we did was continue to follow those lines of live lines, love lines and learn lines that you can see on the outside to inform how we do the strategy. And rather than just reading it and reading the words, this is where we invite people in to share the process and what happened and how we came to this. What part of our physical form did we have to change? What part of our thinking did we change? And in the process, how did that affect our emotional, spiritual, space? How is that connected to the surroundings? And then of course, how does that impact other people when we operate from our heart, which is the heart flower in the middle